Good morning, one and all. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, distinguished researchers, and members of the University Executive. It is with great honor that I welcome you to the annual Alan Paton Lecture, hosted by the Alan Paton Center and Struggle Archives at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. This year's theme is Alan Paton, his early years, exploring the formative years of South Africa's literary and struggle icon. The Alan Paton Lecture honors the legacy of renowned South African author, anti-apartheid activist, and humanitarian, best known for his landmark novel, Cry the Beloved Country. It aims to celebrate his literary contributions and commitment to social justice while fostering dialogue on literature, ethics, and cultural identity in South Africa. We are especially excited to have Mr. Malcolm Pearce as our guest speaker. He's the son of Reginald Oliver Pearce, who was a close friend and university peer of Alan Paton. Mr. Pearce, Malcolm is an accomplished author, photographer, mountaineer, and adventure enthusiast. He has written the first volume of his memoirs, All the Hills Home, which serves as a sequel to Barrier of Spears, which was authored by his father, Reginald Pearce, and the illustrations were done by Malcolm himself. He has also authored A Camera in Okalamba, Photographing the Drakensberg, a photographic record of African mountain ranges, and is widely regarded as one of South Africa's foremost outdoor photographers. Malcolm's work reflects both his passion for nature and his remarkable artistic skills. Today, we gather to reflect on and celebrate the life of Alan Paton's life and work, symbolize moral courage, compassion, and the pursuit of justice. His writings not only influenced global perceptions of South Africa, but also inspired later generations of writers, activists, and leaders. Today, his legacy is preserved at the Alan Paton Center and Struggle Archives at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which houses his books, journals, papers, and documents relating to South Africa's liberation history. The Alan Paton Center began shortly after his death in 1988, when his widow, Mrs. Ann Paton, donated the contents of his study to the former University of Natal. Researchers from around the world visit the center to access unique collections not available elsewhere, collections that offer critical insights into national and continental history. So we warmly invite you to visit the center, explore its rich archival holdings, and engage with the narratives of resilience, resistance, and hope that have shaped our journey as a nation. So let us honor Alan Paton's legacy, not only by remembering him, but by drawing inspiration from his life to continue the work of building a just and humane society. So thank you for joining us today. May this lecture, delivered by one of his close friends, ignite meaningful dialogue and renewed commitment to a better South Africa, a better Africa, and a better world. Thanks. I think over to you, Mr. Pearce.
Thank you, Dr. Paton, and good morning to you all, wherever you might be. I would like to begin by saying what a joy it is for me today to be with you and to have the opportunity of presenting the Alan Paton Lecture this year. This is indeed a high honor. The topic, as you know, is Alan Paton, his early years, and I'm very comfortable with this. My father, R.O. Pearce, author of 3 books on the Drakensberg, including the classic Barrier of Spears, and Alan Paton were close friends throughout their lives. They met at NUC, the Natal University College in Pietermaritzburg, known today as KwaZulu-Natal University, and they remained in touch for 60 years. I have memories of our 2 families holding dinner parties together, and in my mind's eye, I can see us sitting around the table, Alan holding forth on his political views, my dad responding accordingly. Mr. Paton, as he would have been known to me at the time, always spoke kindly to me as a boy, asking about my schoolwork, my hobbies, my interests in life. I was born in 1935, and Cry the Beloved Country was published in 1948. So I was 12 to 13 years of age when Alan's iconic book appeared, an age when one's mind is very clear. Significantly, when Alan was overseas putting the finishing touches to Cry the Beloved Country during the final days of his 4-month tour of Europe and America in 1947, visiting prisons and reformatories, his wife, Dorrie, and the 2 boys, David and Jonathan, were spending the Christmas holidays with us at Cathkin Peak Hotel in the Drakensberg. I recall Jonathan and myself getting up to a lot of mischief. We were about the same age. David was my older sister's age. In later years, I grew to have the highest regard for Mr. Paton. I admired his courage, his fearless condemnation of apartheid, his willingness to put his neck on the block, so to speak, and his exceptional writing skills. He is one of the most extraordinary people to have come out of our beloved land. What a privilege to be able to speak about him today. You may wonder about the sources of the information I'm going to share with you. So let me explain that Paton gave us 2 autobiographies, Towards the Mountain and Journey Continued. In volume 1, he deals with his youth and the years leading up to the publication of Cry the Beloved Country, and in the second, with the aftermath of the publication, his political career. I have drawn quite heavily on volume 1. But there is a second mine of information that I have access to. An astonishing collection of family memorabilia that my mother accumulated during her lifetime. She was very proud of my father and kept a meticulous record of almost every detail of his life, his correspondence with people like Alan Paton, the book prizes he received, the honors and awards accorded him, including the State President's Award for Meritorious Service to the people of South Africa in the field of education, all chronicled in newspaper cuttings, letters, certificates, and publications. When my mother died, this store of information was given to my older sister Muriel, and then passed on to me. In time, this family treasure trove will be inherited by my son Robin, an advocate, who is the sort of fellow who would know what to do with it. Incidentally, it is his birthday today. I hope he is listening, but I have an idea he is in court. Let's dip briefly into those archives. First of all, we have a little booklet given by Alan to my grandparents in 1921, July 1921. And in the flyleaf to the book, you can see the words, "To Mr. and Mrs. Pierce Ladysmith, in grateful recognition of their kindness during my stay, from Alan, July 21. And here we have a certificate, an invitation to my grandparents to attend my father's graduation. in 1923. And the certificate is simply marked Reginald Oliver Pierce, M.A., and the date is given. So these are documents and various things that we have which are very special and precious to us. Then I have a letter here which is very difficult for you to see, but I can read it for you or read the opening comments. It's part of a letter from Alan Paton dated 31st of October 1973, in which he is acknowledging the book that my father had just published, Barrier of Spears. In the letter he says, "Dear Reg, I think your book is a work of art, and the cover matches the contents. Malcolm's pictures are magnificent. I should imagine the book is the pinnacle of Howard Timmons's achievement." He goes on to say, "I cannot imagine a book equal to this, any book that would surpass it. Anywhere in the world, there is no mountain region that has received such an account." And here, and I only wish that you could see it in more detail, I have a very, very interesting photograph. This is the SRC of 1921, featuring Alan and my father. Alan is at that point there, and my father is seated on the floor, and you can see him there. A beautiful photograph, and needless to say, very good quality. Alan and my father served on the university SRC for 2 years. Alan was secretary and my father was president. It is interesting to note that Paton was 3 years younger than my father. He was born on the 11th of January, 1903. My father first saw the light of day on the 9th of March, 1900. And yet they were at university at the same time. How do we explain this? Quite simple. Alan was homeschooled by his mother for a number of years. And when he eventually went to public school, he was found to be more advanced than the other children his age. So he was promoted to a higher standard. He continued to be a bright lad and skipped a year while at high school at Pietermaritzburg College before matriculating in 1918 at the tender age of 15. So he arrived at university a young adolescent. He registered for a science degree with majors in physics and mathematics, graduating 3 years later with distinctions in physics. An 18-month diploma in education followed. He had studied science, which he later taught at Ikopo High School, yet his passion was English literature and poetry. My father spent 4 years reading for a master's degree in English, so the two men's subjects were very different, and yet they had the same interests, poetry and literature. What they also had in common was their love of debating and their firm commitment to the Christian faith. They were members of the Students' Christian Association, and together with Cyril Armitage, started the SCA youth camps for boys on the Natal South Coast. To begin with, these camps were held at a rented property in Umgobaba, and then, with the help of their friend and mentor, J.H. Hofmeyer, who became administrator of the Transvaal and later deputy prime minister under Smuts, and who had a huge influence on a great number of people's lives. Alan Paton and my father's lives included. They raised 1,500 pounds to purchase land at Annerley. They built a hall which they named the Tin Temple and established the Annerley camps that influenced generations of boys in future years. Camp Annerley still stands today, 98 years later, functioning as a youth conference center, a tribute to two young men who once had a vision. Thank you. J.H. Hofmeyr, incidentally, was a child prodigy who had a brilliant scholastic career. He matriculated with distinctions at the age of 12, obtained a BA degree from Cape Town University before he was 15, one of the youngest in history, read for a number of other degrees in South Africa, including an MA, then went to Oxford for 3 years as a Rhodes Scholar to study classics, where he distinguished himself by achieving a double first. At the age of 23, Hofmeyr returned to South Africa and was appointed Professor of Classics at the School of Mines and Technology, which later became the University of the Witwatersrand. He then entered Parliament, holding 2 joint portfolios of Minister of Finance and Minister of Education. It was widely speculated that he would one day become Prime Minister. In spite of all these achievements, he was a very humble man and a man of high moral principles. There were many stories during the rounds at the time that illustrated this. On one occasion, he was visiting Pietermaritzburg and traveling on a municipal bus with 6 or 7 of the SRC students. When the moment came for them to alight, to leave the bus at their bus stop, they had not paid for their fares. The bus conductor had not been to them. But when the moment came and the bus stopped, they climbed off. Hofmeyr gathered the students together and said to them, "You don't need to worry about this. The fare was only a tikkie. I will write out a check for the full amount, and this afternoon I will take it to the municipal offices without apology, and I will explain what happened." A far cry from what happens today the world over in government circles, where there is greed, dishonesty, corruption. Tragically, Hofmeyr died of a heart attack at the relative early age of 54 years on the 3rd of December, 1948, my birthday. I remember it well, for my parents were in deep mourning, giving little thought to my birthday. His death was a severe loss to the country. Alan would later write his biography in a seminal 545-page work. But what about Alan Paton himself? Alan had a very strict religious upbringing. His father was a Christadelphian, a faith founded by John Harris in the mid-1950s. And in this faith they believed in literal interpretation of the Bible, but their philosophies and teachings differed from the mainline churches on several notable points of doctrine. What is significant for us is that Christadelphians are conscientious objectors. They are not allowed to take up arms or join a police force, nor can they vote or participate in political activities. Pursuits like drama and the writing of novels were also frowned upon. Had Allen not converted to Methodism while at university, and then joined the Anglican Church, a denomination which he felt had clearer boundaries, his career as an author and a political activist would most certainly never have materialized. The influence of his early upbringing is, however, clearly evident in all he did and in all he ever wrote. He was comfortable with the church, took an active part in the life of his local church community, gave his sons biblical names, David and Jonathan, and incorporated Christian themes in all his novels. My father, incidentally, shared Allen's Christian convictions and was a lay preacher in the Methodist Church for 70 years, receiving a certificate from the Conference of the Methodist Church to acknowledge this shortly before he died. Sorry about that. In part one of his memoirs, Towards the Mountain, Allen writes that life for him at University College was by no means all religion, academics, higher pursuit, laboratory research, and study. He joined both the dramatic and the debating societies, and on the sporting front took part in rugby, cricket, and tennis, playing with much enthusiasm, but not much distinction, he wrote. He also began running at night, but like most young men of his day, his main interest was country walking. During weekends, he teamed up with men like Joe Dent, Neville Nuttall, Cyril Armitage, and Reg Pierce to walk in the hills around Pietermaritzburg, exchanging wit, reciting apt verses of poetry, developing an intense love of nature, and keeping his body fit. At the time, there was very little transport between Pietermaritzburg and the various students' hometowns. So at the end of the term, they would walk to their villages. They saw this as part of their vocation. There were two men in particular who made this a regular practice: Reg Pierce, Ladysmith, and Cyril Armstrong, whose girlfriend lived on a farm north of Dundee. Allen often accompanied them. A little sip again. In 1921, at the end of the third term, Pierce, Paton, and Armitage decided to walk to Ladysmith, using the main road that runs from Durban to Johannesburg, a distance of about 110 miles in those days, to be covered in 4 days. They would be pulling a homemade cart consisting of a wooden box mounted on bicycle wheels that contained their tent, blankets, and provisions. This contraption had been christened Names, because, as my father explained, every time they had to lug it uphill, they found themselves resorting to expletives. Names also had regular tire punctures. Alan writes that on the last day's march, which was 52 kilometers, they dared not sit down, 52 miles, let's be correct. They dared not sit down to rest because they would not have been able to get up again. They reached the Pierces' home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and after a good night's sleep, played tennis the next day. These guys were tough. I'd like to pause for a moment and say that I have visited KwaZulu-Natal 3 times this year. And on the last occasion, as I was leaving Howick, it occurred to me that I would be traveling along the same road that my father had walked more than 100 years ago. But at that time, there were no tarred roads. The roads were gravel, and they were pitted with holes, and there was dust everywhere. And as I travelled at a high pace along the beautiful modern highway, and one horizon loomed up and I passed it next, it occurred to me how incredible a journey they had undertaken, and I was overwhelmed with admiration for their accomplishment. And here is an amusing story that appears in Towards the Mountain, which I must read because no one could tell it better than Paton. My eyes are not too good, and I don't always read well, but let's go for it. On another occasion, Pierce and I decided to walk to Natal's Table Mountain, sleep the night on top, and return to Pietermaritzburg via Umlaas Road. Pierce had catered very parsimoniously, and we finished all our food at the evening meal and were still hungry. It was the month of May, and we did not expect rain, but rain it did. Just lost my place. We spent a cold and miserable night. I was awakened in the hour before dawn by the crackling of the fire. I opened my eyes to see that Pierce was toasting a crust of bread, our last scrap of food. In my starved and cold condition, I jumped to a terrible conclusion, namely, that he intended to eat it all himself. This dastardly act inflamed me, and when Pierce told me that he had intended to wake me and give me half the crust, I treated his story with contempt. I was in a thoroughly bad temper, and I put him in one too. I ate my half crust full of hatred. Then we packed and started on our walk to Umlaas Road. Our first task was to descend from the mountain down a steep and narrow defile. Pierce went first, and I realized that one push from me would send him to a grievous injury or death. I played with the idea, but did not proceed with the act. One thing, however, was clear to me, that it would be a proper end for a mean and ignoble life. Only the thought of the death penalty deterred me. Then the sun came out, and we were warm again. What is more, Pierce had 2 shillings and bought a calabash of sour milk, half of which he offered to me. When I had finished my share, I realized the contemptibility of my behavior. I mumbled an apology which Pierce grudgingly accepted. Some 30 years later, I was invited to present the prizes at Escort High School, and I told the story of Table Mountain. I thought it was funny, and the boys and the girls thought it was funny. I think the staff thought it was funny, but I don't think the headmaster thought it was funny. Funny or not, it was the true story of an episode in our long friendship, which has now lasted over 60 years. I might add that camp catering was never one of my father's strong points. When I was a young boy, hiking with him in the Drakensberg, one trip was 14 days long when I was only 11 years of age. Our food was most unimaginable. We had oatmeal porridge for breakfast, oatmeal porridge for supper, and rusks, chocolate and cheese for lunch, washed down with a mug of OXO. When questioned, my father would explain that oatmeal was light and easy to carry, and that the chocolate and cheese provided all the goodness, energy, and flavoring that one could need. No mention was ever made of monotony. And now, in closing, a word about the writing of Cry the Beloved Country. First, the title. A book needs a good title. Titles like The Grapes of Wrath, Pride and Prejudice, To Kill a Mockingbird, Barrier of Spears caught the attention of readers. For my own book, I chose All the Hills Are Home. Words that have alliteration and a lilt to them, a title that has been well received. When people asked Paton where the title Cry the Beloved Country came from, he had to admit that the book was fully written before it had a title. His publishers were anxious to go to print and were putting pressure on him. So he read right through the manuscript from start to finish. In chapter 9, he came across the words, "Cry the beloved country, for the unborn child that is the inheritant of our fear." And he said immediately, "There's my title." Allow me to pause for a moment and say that I have a collection of memorable quotes from Paton's writings. My favorite is, "Sorrow is better than fear. Fear is a journey, a terrible journey, but sorrow is at least an arrival." Paton's literary style, as we all know, is poetic, poignant, enigmatic, lyrical. He once described himself as a poet who writes novels. This is particularly true, you could say, of Cry the Beloved Country, written in 1947 in a beautiful style while he was on tour overseas, visiting prisons and reformatories in Europe and North America, with a view to gaining information that might assist him in his work as warden of the Deep Kloof Reformatory. And this was for black young men, offenders in Johannesburg, boys anywhere from the ages of 8 to 18. After having been in Europe for about a month, he began to feel homesick. He describes having been in a strange mood for a couple of days, speaking a great deal to himself, composing sentences that seemed to him to be very beautiful. On the 24th of September, he entered Norway, and the person who met him at the border, a Mr. Jensen, said he wanted to take him to their cathedral before proceeding to the hotel. This century-old cathedral was the most elegant in Norway, where kings were crowned, and it had one of the most beautiful rose windows in the world above the cross that glowed with life as the sun was setting. It was late afternoon when they entered the building, almost dark, and the cathedral itself was in darkness. His host explained the lights had been turned off at 4 o'clock to save electricity, for Norway in 1946 was bitterly poor, having been stripped of almost everything by the Germans. Paton writes, "We sat down in two of the front pews and looked at the window. There was still enough light in the sky to see its magnificent design and its colors. We did not speak, and I do not know how long we sat there. I was in the grip of a powerful emotion, not directly to do with the cathedral and the rose window, but certainly occasioned by them. I was filled with an intense homesickness for home and wife and sons and for my far-off country." "Let's go to the hotel," said Jensen, "and at 7 o'clock I shall call for you and take you to dinner." It must have been about 6 o'clock when Paton reached his room. He sat down and wrote these words: "There is a lovely road that runs from Ikopo into the hills. These hills are grass-covered and rolling, and they are lovely beyond any singing of it." When I read those words, I feel a shiver going down my spine. He thought for a moment and continued, "The road climbs 7 miles into them to Karasbuk, and from there, if there is no mist, you look down on one of the fairest valleys of Africa." Now the floodgates opened, and in the next 60 minutes before going out to dinner that night, he wrote the whole of chapter 1. And that chapter ends with these words: "The great red hills stand desolate, and the earth has torn away like flesh. The lightning flashes over them, the clouds pour down upon them, the dead streams come to life, full of the red blood of the earth. Down in the valleys, women scratch the soil that is left, and the maize hardly reaches the height of a man. They are valleys of old men and old women, of mothers and children. The men are away. The young men and the girls are away. The soil cannot keep them anymore." Was he overreacting? No. If he was to write a book about the beloved country, he would not write about the beauty of the mists and the hills and the valleys. he would expose the truth and write about the injustices, the inequalities, the ugliness that was tearing his country apart. Thus began the work that would fill the remaining years of his life, fighting for a just and democratic society in South Africa. And it all began with a young lad of exceptional promise, whose formative years were spent among the inspirational friends at Pietermaritzburg University College, where the Alan Paton Center is located today, and where a long avenue is named after him. We all know that Paton lived to see 2 million copies of his book published and translated into something like 26 languages. The copy that I own, inherited by my father, is from the earliest batch that was printed in New York at the beginning of 1948. And inside is an inscription from Alan Paton's hand. I hope you can see that. R.O. Pierce, just R.O.P. in fact, from ASP 1904-48. I thank you.
Malcolm,
Mm.
thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I'm sure that everyone who's been listening to you speak has been enthralled by your talk thus far. You know, it would have been so much more fitting, I think, had you come to Pietermaritzburg and spoken in person, because I think that many people would have loved to browse through all your memorabilia, the many books, the inscriptions of Alan Paton to your father, to your family. It was a wonderful talk. Sorry. I just wanted to mention a few things that you touched on before I'm going to ask you a question or two. So these are just comments for now, but I will get to the questions shortly. I want to just quote a passage that you quoted as well in your talk. And I think that many people might not know this, but this line from Alan Paton's novel, Cry the Beloved Country, is the most quoted passage in South African literature of all time. And there is a lovely road that runs from Ikopo into the hills. These hills are grass-covered and rolling, and they are lovely beyond any singing of it. The road climbs 7 miles into them to Carisbrook, and from there, if there is no mist, you look down on one of the fairest valleys of Africa. About you there is grass and bracken, and you may hear the forlorn crying of the titihoya, one of the birds of the veld. Below you is the valley of the Umzimkhulu on its journey from the Drakensberg to the sea. And behind the river, great hill after great hill, and beyond and behind them, the mountains of Ingeri and East Griqualand. The grass is rich and matted. You cannot see the soil. It holds the rain and mist, and they seep into the ground, feeding the streams in every kloof. It is well tended, and not too many cattle feed upon it. Not too many fires burn it. laying bare the soil. Stand unshod upon it, for the ground is holy, being even as it came from the Creator. Keep it, guard it, care for it, for it keeps men, guards men, cares for men. Destroy it, and man is destroyed. And you can see, you can almost hear it, that nostalgia, that loneliness in Norway, when he picked up the pen. And I think that even if one had to try and edit it, you wouldn't get it much more perfect and much more rhythmically perfect than what he has written. It was quite a sobering thought, Malcolm, as you spoke and you gave us dates, to think that almost 100 years, just over 100 years ago, your dad and Alan Paton were students at what is now the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the old Natal University. A century has passed since then. For many people who might be not knowing the history of Alan Paton and his formative years, especially in Pietermaritzburg, 1928 to 1935, also taught at Maritzburg College. Got married in 1928 to Dorrie Francis. And so, 1928, I'm hoping that Maritzburg College might be, someone from Maritzburg College might be listening, because that is another milestone, a centenary when, he became a teacher at college. Malcolm, what I'm most grateful to you for is I had always heard that Paton and these camps at Annerley, and for years I tried to figure out where about, because later in life he had a holiday home as well in Annerley, and I could never find that address in Annerley, but at least you've given me something to go to now, to go and try and find what you refer to as Annerley camps. And I'm going to go and try, the next time I go to the South Coast, I'm going to go and visit it just to see, almost 100 years ago, what your dad and Paton and many others created, and still stands today. And you also mentioned that Paton referred to himself as a poet who writes novels. And there are many poems written by Alan Paton. But for Pietermaritzburg people, once again, there's a lovely poem written in concrete on the walls of Maritzburg College called Old Walls. You can look it up on the internet. But for those of you close to Pietermaritzburg, I advise you to take a trip to Maritzburg College and to see the poem that was actually written with a stick by Alan Paton himself. And then, what is wonderful for me is the reference to his autobiography, one of, is it Towards the Mountain, To the Mountain? Right, To the Mountain. And, you talk about walking the hills of Pietermaritzburg as a young man with all his friends. And I would imagine that would include your dad as well. But I wanted to ask you, as a person who is so steeped in sort of mountain mythology, what do you think is the draw of mountains to people like Paton? Because I'm sure that you have that same affinity for mountains that Paton has. And I want to ask you, what is it for people like you and for Paton? What is so special about mountains?
A very, very interesting question. I can only say there is magic in those mountains. Somehow the beauty, the loveliness of creation is fully expressed there. The heights, the great, great heights that we saw too, somehow almost seem to touch the sky and in a sense symbolize what is to come, a life to come. For a lot of people, they have said the mountains speak of heaven. Now, that's putting it very, very simply. For me, I can only say from the earliest days, I just found them extraordinarily beautiful. I loved the exercise. I loved the views. I loved climbing higher and higher and higher and achieving summits. It's all inclusive, something very, very special in one's very soul. Difficult to express, but for me, mountains are extraordinarily beautiful.
Thank you, Malcolm. I think that you and Paton and your dad naturally, you're a kindred spirits, and I don't think that it is romanticizing it too much, because even in the novel, um, the scene of the father, the priest going to the mountain on the day that Kumalo will be uh, hanged, and then comes down from the mountain. Um, there seems to be something about mountains that Paton simply was drawn to. But on a more lighter note, what you might have edited out of your talk, or maybe you haven't seen it, but I've seen it at the Alan Paton Center, are a few photographs of Alan Paton with friends, and I would imagine that includes your father. They used to go for an annual pilgrimage to the Drakensberg, but that is not what's important. I was I was reminded of this because you kept on drinking something that looks surprisingly the color of beer. Um, and it could be Oros, but it could be beer. And why I'm mentioning it, why I'm mentioning it is that there's a photograph at the Alan Paton Center of many beer cans strewn on the ground in the Drakensberg. I think they were posing for a photograph. I don't think they littered the place. But have you ever seen that photograph, Malcolm?
No, I will look for it next time I go.
Yes, you must go. It's a beautiful photograph. Lots of people having a wonderful time in the mountains in the Drakensberg, and all these beer cans, lots and lots of beer cans. So I can see most probably where you got that thirst from. It's an inherited thirst. And then I just wanted to also finally say that you mentioned in your talk that he went to a cathedral in Norway. In your research, um, did you ever come across, sorry, we can't hear you, Malcolm, but did you ever come across the name of that cathedral in Norway?
Do you know the name of the cathedral in Norway?
You know, I do have it. I think it is mentioned in Towards the Mountain. So one could, in fact, go into that and get the name. The thought that occurred to me, if I ever went there, I would love to go to that cathedral and sit quietly in that beautiful atmosphere and gaze up at that rose window. I think it would definitely be something very, very special to experience. But there is the name, and I'm
Okay.
sure it's in the book.
Okay, I will go back to my copy and
Hmm.
I will read it once more. Um, but I also just wanted to say, it's quite phenomenal, to hear 2 million copies. The book is translated into 26 languages. And if there's any Afrikaans scholars on the chat, that is the one oversight in Afrikaans literature, is that Cry the Beloved Country has never been translated into Afrikaans.
That's so. That's interesting.
Yeah. If I was good enough to do it, I would do it in a flash, because I think it's a wrong that needs to be righted. So it's something that you know is waiting to be done by some master's student or PhD student, is to translate the novel into Afrikaans. And finally, I just wanted to say that, you know, Alan Paton has such a strong links with Pietermaritzburg, and especially with the university, with Maritzburg College, with his many homes in Pietermaritzburg. And it's our wish and our dream that one day soon, when everything comes right, that there's, you know, many years ago there was talk of having a kind of a boulevard of a kind of literary boulevard of statues of all Pietermaritzburg's most famous writers. And so if you are a wealthy man and you have some money to spare, maybe bequeath us a statue of Alan Paton in your will. I will make sure it enjoys pride of place somewhere in Pietermaritzburg. But Malcolm, thank you so much for a fascinating talk, and I'm going to hand over to members of the audience in case they have any questions, and I will look on the chat if there's any questions for you before I hand back to you for the final word.
Thank you.
There's just a comment here that you can't see, Malcolm, by Jenny Sprong. She says, Malcolm's spouse taught us a song in the Berg, which included sentences like, "The trees of the forest are like pipes of an organ." Would that be right?
Did Eileen teach them songs in the Berg? The one lady with trees of the pipes are like organs.
I don't recall that.
Okay. And Malcolm, you know, one thing that I must say, that Alan Paton, you know, he did everything right. You know, in an age where everything is electronic, it's so wonderful to have so many like exemplars of his writing, you know, in his own handwriting, his signature, etc. And the one mistake he made was when he died, he was cremated and he scattered his ashes in his home in Kloof. If you had to script it, are there many people who scatter their ashes in the Drakensberg, for instance?
People have been in touch with me very recently. Very close friends' ashes have just been sprinkled out on the hills close to Cathedral Peak. And I have already chosen the site where I would like my ashes to be scattered.
Wonderful.
A lot of people have a very, very strong desire for that.
Yeah, you know, it would have been wonderful, you know, especially given the importance of mountains in the life of Alan Paton, you know, if he had just thought about that, because when you scatter your ashes at a home, inevitably that home never stays in the same family. And it, you know, and most probably the current owners don't even know about, you know, what is scattered in the garden where they might be planting fruit trees, etc. But yeah, Malcolm, thank you so much for a riveting talk. I'm sure that everyone who is online and has heard you speak has gone home enriched after your talk, and it has been a privilege this year. Coincidentally, we just met you because of your book, All the Hills Are Home, and you are so right. Such a poetic title, and it's been wonderful that our paths have crossed, and I'm so glad that we have been able to host you via the Alan Paton Center on the Pietermaritzburg campus for the Alan Paton Lecture. Thank you so much for all your effort in putting your talk together. And the last word is yours, Malcolm.
The last word would be to say, I visited the Alan Paton Center this last May, and I was absolutely enthralled with what was there. Beautiful setting, everything laid out so beautifully, incredible amount of information that has been stored, and I'd like to congratulate those who are manning it, maintaining it, and making it available to the public. If you get the chance to visit Pietermaritzburg, don't miss the Alan Paton Center. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. I had tried to host the talk from Alan Paton's study at the Alan Paton Center. They would have none of it. They said, sit in your own house and do the talk. But it's been wonderful. It's been absolutely wonderful having you here. Thank you so much. And over to you now, Roshni.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. That was excellent. Sharing those priceless documents with us this morning as well was excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Daryl. Thank you so much for your comments. I'd like to now close by calling on our Manager of Special Collections, Mr. Senzo Mkhize, to do the vote of thanks, and then we'll close this annual lecture. Thank you.
As we draw the 2025 annual Alan Paton lecture to a close, it is my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks. First and foremost, we extend our heartfelt appreciation to our esteemed keynote speaker, Mr. Malcolm Pease, and his family who have taken time out to grace this occasion. Today, we had the opportunity to hear your thoughts about the life and times of our great scholar and writer, Dr. Alan Paton. Your thoughts have enlightened our minds. To our facilitator, Mr. Thiru Munsem, and our respondent, David Darren. Thank you so much. To all attendants, members of the university executive, faculty, staff, students, and distinguished guests, thank you for your presence and participation. Your support affirms the enduring relevance of Dr. Alan Paton's work and strengthens our collective resolve to carry forward his vision. We would like to acknowledge with gratitude the dedicated efforts of the teams who work tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event possible, from logistics and coordination to technical support and online venue management. Your commitment has ensured that the focus remains where it truly belongs, on celebrating the life, courage, and enduring impact of Dr. Alan Paton. Special thanks are also extended to the following individuals: the DVC of Research and Innovation, the Director of UKZN Library Special Collections, Dr. Nonhlanhla Ngcobo, Portfolio Head of Special Collections, Dr. Roshin Patha, and Mrs. Pamela Adams, Event and Protocol Manager from Corporate Relations, for her excellent work in setting up this lecture. Last but certainly not least, heartfelt appreciation goes to our Special Collections team In particular, Alan Paton Center, Senior Librarian, Ms. Namisile Zuma, Library Assistant, Mrs. Sharon Latif, and Mr. Wiseman Masam for their dedication in organizing this important event. As we live here today, may we each carry forward the spirit of inquiry, resilience, and service that defined Dr. Alan Paton's life. Let us transform the inspiration we have gained into tangible action that uplifts and strengthens our communities. Thank you once again for being part of this meaningful occasion. We look forward to welcoming you to future lectures and events. Safe travel, and may you have a pleasant weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Census. Thank you very much, one and all, for joining us this morning. Take care. Thank you.